We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. Above, Lord God, I bow at your feet. Please bless this mendicant that ye keep to mountain retreat. You patrons here of the auspicious connection for accomplishing the good of self and others. This hard to come by and easily lost body is well because it's met with your provisions. The richness of the earth with its fruits and seeds, and the deep blue sky with its rain and peace, are the connections that bring benefit to beings. The heart of this connection is the Dharma divine. The illusion of a body brought up by parents and the Guru's instructions so profound are the connections that cause the Dharma to grow. The heart of this connection is wholeheartedness. My caves in wild uninhabited valleys, and my Dharma practice that is not mere words, are the connections for accomplishing my true heart wish. The heart of this connection is emptiness. Milarepa's endurance in meditation, and the faith of beings in all three realms, are the connections for the benefit of every being. The heart of this connection is compassion. The yogin who meditates on rocky peaks, and the patrons providing his sustenance, are the connections for us all to awaken together. The heart of this connection is the sharing of punya. The compassion of a kind and genuine Guru, and the patient meditation of good disciples, are the connections for holding the Dharma firm. The heart of this connection is Samaya. The Abhisheka with swift Adhisthana, and our heartfelt and fervent prayers, are the connections for quickly meeting again. The heart of this connection is auspiciousness. The essence of Akshobhya, Lord Vajradhara, please know the joys and sorrows of this mendicant. There's a lot in there, isn't there? I hope I can go into it in more detail tomorrow, at least some of it. I think there's a wrong, well I know there's a wrong translation in this second line, where it says the deep blue sky with those rain and bees. It's not bees, it's, somebody told me the other day it was mist. Mist and rain. And then I thought, if that's mist and rain, maybe the line above we could make fruits and grain. What do you think? I'm asking Priscilla, she's an expert translator.
No, I can't find it.
Third verse, first and second line.
Why not? So there you are. It's now been corrected to it's fruits and grain and mist and rain. How about that? It's been bothering me for a while actually. Ever since I found out it wasn't bees, I felt embarrassed. I like the bees.
I like the bees.
Well, you can have these if you want. It's not in the Tibetan, but never mind. Okay, so lovely questions. Thank you very much. I really like questions. Yes. I think it's because it makes it a conversation, doesn't it? Because you've been thinking about it and now you're asking, and it's like we can now develop it further. So the first one, I'm just doing it by whatever order they end up in. So the question about the use of ritual to focus our practice, the interaction with the teacher role, particularly confusion, or with giving out teaching instructions and creating the teaching situation. I'm not sure this is one question or several. Comparing in other traditions, a Roman Catholic liturgy at a Quaker meeting, ritual is more than ritual, it connects us to our bodhisattva nature. So interesting question in about what is ritual actually. Very interesting in the distinction that René Guénon makes between a ritual and a ceremony. I've spoken about this before, haven't I? That a ritual actually makes something happen. So like a marriage ritual, before the ritual you're not married, then you do the ritual, then you are married, and that's made a difference to the world and everybody's relationships in it. It's the same with crowning a king or queen. Before they're crowned, they're not king or queen, but then with the ritual, they then are, and then everything else from then on, it's like entered in a whole new world. It's like, so all those rites of passage are rituals, whereas quite a lot of the time these days, he points out that we've lost that sense of ritual, and that actually we are doing something, that it's real. We've turned it into ceremonies and celebrations so that they're more, people use their imagination and kind of make a big event out of it. But it doesn't have the effect that, it isn't actually a ritual as such, but traditionally rituals were surrounded by ceremonies. So the actual rituals maybe only takes a moment. But then to kind of highlight it and make it kind of, to get us to enter it in the right kind of way and celebrate it in the right kind of way. There are ceremonies and sort of customs and celebrations that go on. It's very much like we say in DHB, the kind of acknowledging, aligning, honouring and celebrating. Yeah. I'm looking at Alan because it came from him, although he forgot it came from him. It's one of those gems that came forth. But I think it's the acknowledging of it, as we know, is very, very powerful, isn't it? As we acknowledge something, even in our experience, in our meditation or our Dharma practice, we acknowledge it. And that brings about a change in itself, doesn't it? But then if you don't really align with it and you don't really honour it, it can slip away very easily. But if you really honour it, really align with it, and then even celebrate it, which I think sometimes as Westerners we're not used to celebrating our own successes and our own virtues, as if, I have to think it isn't anything or I'll get proud. But we can overdo that. We really need to think, yes, that was good. More of that. I can do it. More of that. We need to do that. We need to really kind of congratulate ourselves and egg ourselves on, not to think, can't possibly be good because I did it. Which we do tend to go like that way, don't we? Well, it wasn't that good really. I mean, anyone could have done that. No, it wasn't. It's very negative, not necessary, not helpful. So yes, ritual is this, even just putting the offerings on the shrine is a ritual, isn't it? And if you decide to yourself, well, I'm going to do that. Like, for example, I made the decision, I'm not going to start my breakfast, having a cup of tea or anything like that, until I've offered to the Buddhas first. So even when I'm feeling really grotty and I'm not going to do anything else, I do manage to actually do that ritual. And then that actually becomes the bedrock, really, of how I live my day. That first I'm going to offer to the Buddhas. So, I have this ritual, and each part of it has meaning. Sometimes I do it, the meaning really, I'm really aligned with it. And sometimes I'm just, keeping it going so that the habit is still there. And then when I sort of sharpen up, I can take it further. I can go back into it. And if you're sharp, you can find that a ritual takes you back to the place where when you first encountered it and you encounter the meaning of it, and you get a real sense that it is actually real, that you are actually offering to the Buddhas, that it's a small action, but it's real, and it's not in time, really. Sometimes I get the feeling with some of these rituals I've been doing for decades, each time I do it, it's the same time. It's like the first time or the last time or every time. So you can get a lot of insight from doing the ritual, actually. And we've got various ones, haven't we? Like doing prostrations with the kind of the meaning that comes with that. And you can go into more and more detail. Sometimes Lamas go into such incredible detail, I wonder how on earth they manage to practice it. I don't know if you've ever read any of those books where they go into every single little part of the putting the bowls out is full of meaning, and any little mistake will have dire karmic consequences. So, well, I guess you just take that as far as you want it. But in the Avatamsaka Sutra, I think is it the Dashabhumika? Can't remember which part it's in. It talks about how your small action in this world at this time is actually interpenetrates, if you like, with doing that on a vast scale. So simple actions like, and this is interesting because you don't usually think of walking downstairs as a ritual, but you can actually link it with the thought, I'm going to go down into the lower realms to bring beings back from lower realms into awakening. And you can actually think that as you're walking, and at some point you start to realise it's actually true. It's a long journey from thinking that's a nice thought to realising that could be true. But it's something to do with what emptiness actually means, interestingly. We tend to think, it's something that you have to understand intellectually. You have to think it very hard. But actually it's the opposite way around. As you let go of the grasping and thinking, and you recognise what emptiness really means, you realise it is absolutely true. So there's something to ponder, something to look forward to. So I'm not sure I did quite understand the interaction with the teacher role. So I guess there is ritual surrounding the teacher's role, isn't there? Sort of when I come in the room, it's announced, teacher, the Dhamma teacher, please stand for the Dhamma teacher. And I think it means something, doesn't it? I mean, we always used to stand for our teachers at school. Do people still do that? No, we always used to stand anyway, so it feels very normal to me that you stand. But it does create a mandala, doesn't it? Because the teacher comes in, and because everyone's paying attention and they're standing and showing respect, it creates a mandala where the teacher can open out and the students can receive the teaching. Whereas if they're all messing around and not paying attention and they're not treating the teacher with any respect, it's very hard for anything much to happen. The teacher has to then put a lot of effort into taming the class, and then it's not so much fun for anyone. But I don't know if that's what this question was about. Does anyone want to say more about what it was about? Or shall we leave it at that? Particularly confusion with giving out teaching instructions and creating a teaching situation. So maybe I've covered it. Comparing it to other traditions, the Roman Catholic, yes, you would have liturgy, where you have a priest, I suppose that's thinking about when you have a priest who then does the ritual, and you think of, because the priest is doing the ritual and is authorised to do the ritual and has been given the transmission to give the ritual, then the rest of the congregation, they create that mandala, and then I think this is that first part of the Adhisthana coming to us from that priest through the ritual, whatever it is. And we have the same sort of thing, don't we? Like you do a ritual and everybody's there to receive the Adhisthana of that, and a sense of the connection with that, and that something has really happened. Certainly in the Catholic Church, it's very, very strong sense of it being real, isn't there? I was talking to Patrizia about that. Yeah. And a Quaker meeting where they don't use rituals, do they? Except the ritual of sitting quietly together. So it's a very minimal ritual, and I think no hierarchy at all, is there? It's like the centre.
There is.
Yes.
Oh, there is?
They're called weighty friends.
Weighty.
Ah,
Because
because guru means weighty.
Oh, right.
Yeah. It's interesting, so I don't know about that. So I can't really answer about a Quaker meeting. You'd have to think about it. Ritual more than ritual. It connects us to Bodhisattva nature. Yeah, that's right. It depends how you use the word ritual. It's not just... We tend to use the word ritual these days to mean mechanical and not really putting your heart in it, doesn't it? It's just a ritual. So if you're using ritual like that, yes, it's much more than a ritual like that. It is actually real. And it does connect us in a very deep way. In a way because it brings into the foreground what the mandala is that we're interacting with. So there could be a background sense that, yes, I'm the teacher and you've got respect for me and you're really hoping that I'll teach and this will be a good event. It's in the background. But then when I'm announced and I step in the room and you all stand, then it becomes very evident. That's what the mandala is. That's the, it's all going according to a shared vision and values and ethos around what this event's going to be, what this mandala is going to be. So it's a clear indication to everybody that we're all on board and we're all on the same page, if you like, and that's very energizing. Whereas if half the people said, well, we're not going to stand, it would be a different mandala, wouldn't it, altogether? A very, very subtle difference, isn't it? Because we're all sitting and standing all the time. But if you were to determinedly sit through the announcement that, you know, please stand for the teacher, it would have a very loud message to it, wouldn't it? Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it? So, nobody wants to pipe up, I'll leave that there. Whilst acknowledging a structural need in a Sangha for hierarchy implies a judgment and a more than, less than. Are these not in contradiction to a Buddhist approach? And how does holding a position in a hierarchy meld with the dissolution of holding positions and attachments of self? So it's really important to know the difference. Really important. While acknowledging a structural need in a Sangha, so we're accepting that there needs to be structure, the question is what hierarchy means, really, isn't it? What do we mean by hierarchy here? Do we mean that we're pigeonholing people and classifying them and saying some are good, some are bad, some are more this, some are more that? Obviously, there's lots of differences in a group of people. All sorts of differences. But actually a group of people with lots of differences, I mean, if it has no structure, how's it going to accomplish anything? There has to be some structure. There has to be some shared vision. So maybe it's that, okay, we've got a leader and we're going to follow this leader. That would be a shared vision and an agreement that that's how we're going to go. Or, if we're not, how are we going to do it? And what procedure are we going to use? So there has to be some procedure. You could say, well, whoever shouts loudest and pushes hardest, we do that. Yeah, all right. It's one option. Probably the default option. Or we might feel, well, that's not necessarily the best thing. We want to have some kind of discussion. So how do we hold a discussion? How do we even begin the discussion? There has to be some kind of shared understanding about how you go about it. So you've already created a structure, and when you've created a structure like that in a group, then there's those people who know that's what the structure is, and then new people coming in who don't know that's what the structure is. So the people already there who know what the structure is have that central position to inform the people coming in, this is what we do. So you've automatically got what I would call a hierarchy, but you might not like that name for it. You could say concentric circles of increasing knowledge, commitment, vision, or I don't know, you'd have to kind of think of a way of describing it that you felt comfortable with. But Rigzin Shikpa, when he was teaching Mandala Principle, used hierarchy because it's sometimes people like it better when I say it's a horizontal hierarchy. So that's fine, no problem. You can call it horizontal if you like. I have nothing against vertical personally, but gives you another dimension. But there will be some kind of hierarchy developing, otherwise the mandala isn't going to accomplish anything. It's just going to kind of mill around for a bit and then split up. So if it's going to actually form and do something effective, it will have a central principle and it will have whatever you want to call that horizontal hierarchy. And there's nothing in Buddhism that says, there's anything wrong with that. I'm always interested when people say there should, it implies a judgment, as if somehow perceiving that some things are different from other things, some things are more this and some things are more that, is some kind of problem. I can't imagine how you would get on in such a world if you couldn't make observations like that. Some of us are taller, some of us are shorter, some of us are, some of us are quite clumsy and forgetful, and some of us are quite neat and quick and organised, and endless qualities. We're all very different, aren't we? So in terms of, just to observe that carefully and work with that, it's intelligent, isn't it? So I think what people mean when they think, well, you shouldn't be judgmental, it's like when you take you're doing more than just taking into account the reality of the situation, and you're kind of adding an extra twist to it. You know, like, well, that person is like that, and they're really a nuisance, and we've got to keep them out of it. Or some kind of much more complicated mindset around what's going on. It's kind of like the opposite of what we'd call openness, isn't it? When we're open, we're very, we're acknowledging what's happening and the differences and working with them. When we're judgmental in this negative sense, we've got our preconceived idea and we're trying to push everything into fitting into our idea, aren't we? I think that's when it becomes judgmental. But if it's just a fact, it's just a fact you work with, don't you? Which people are, which, as I said, which people actually know what the shared vision is, the values are, which people are the people to go to for information about what this is. They're going to be, they're bound to, I think it's difficult to think of a diagram better than a circle with a circle inside that and a circle inside that and a circle inside that. And then you can call that concentric circles, I suppose, couldn't you? They're outer circle, inner circle, closer inner circle. We sometimes use language like that, don't we? So that's what I'm talking about when I say hierarchy. And there's no contradiction to a Buddhist approach. Buddhists are quite practical. I don't know. Buddhist covers everybody who thinks they're Buddhist. So it's difficult to say what they're like, really, isn't it? But there's no Buddhist principle. There's no principle by means of which there's anything wrong with that. And definitely the Buddha, he set up a hierarchy in his Sangha, didn't he? In the monastic Sangha, he kept it to a very simple hierarchy, which was the people who came first were the seniors, and everybody after that was juniors, until it came to women joining in. And then he thought, now how do I stop them all getting mixed up? And in those days they didn't seem to be able to control themselves if they got mixed up. So he had to keep them separate. So okay, the women come after the men. I think we can handle being all mixed up. Yeah. But yeah, some sort of structure. It must have been very awkward, mustn't it? I mean, it must be very awkward. If you've got to have an order in which people do things, then what order are you going to choose? You're going to choose, well, we'll put the most learned and the most well-disciplined and the most virtuous ones at the front. Then every time you entered the room, you'd have to go through them and think, well, I don't know, I think he knows more than you. So it's very clever and very simple to say, well, if they came in first, can never be disputed. So a good way to keep the peace. I suppose that would say, well, that's really non-judgmental, isn't it? Because it's just a fact he came in first. So he's most senior, so we'll put him in the top place. But then what about the women? I mean, the poor men, they're going to be deprived of these wonderful women, aren't they? In a separate community. So, maybe I've gone off the topic now. How does holding a position in a hierarchy meld with the dissolution of holding positions and attachments of self? So it's the same answer, but I think it's important. Because in a mandala, like a Sangha mandala, it's really important that it's clear what positions people are holding. Because that provides clarity for everybody. It doesn't, you can put different people in the positions, it's very clear. It's good. So one person is teacher. So it's my turn. I'm doing the teacher bit. So another time it would be another person. But you all know how to relate to the teacher because you've learnt to do it with me. And then when somebody else comes in, like with the sheep were coming, then we all know how to relate to him. So, and then you can have somebody who's the messenger, who's running around, carrying messages all over the place. Well, you need to know who are the messages. You want to send a message, you need to know who's holding the position of a messenger. And they said, oh, well, we're all the same. But, some of us, if you tell them, oh, could you take this message? They said, well, I don't know how to take this message. I don't know anybody. I don't know the other people here. I don't know who you're talking about. It's natural that we have different positions and we play them well. So whatever position we get, we play it well. And then that makes the whole mandala go well because everyone's playing their role well. Then we can all congratulate ourselves on how well this mandala is working. Like I congratulate us all that this weekend is going really well because everyone's playing their part, everyone's doing their bit so that the energy can flow and we can get the best out of everybody and out of the whole situation. So it's good. And being attached to a position can become a problem, can't it? So if I was really attached to being teacher, then, I would think, well, I don't want Big Shikpo coming because, I'm the teacher. So you have to, But if I'm not attached, then I can enjoy it too, It's the same with any of these jobs, if you're attached to being, I'm the best cook and I'm not going to hand it over to anyone else, then, and you start to kind of insist on that, it can cause all sorts of friction and tension for yourself and for other people. Whereas if actually you're needed to do something else, and somebody else is going to come in and learn how to do the cooking, maybe they don't do it as well, but does it matter? How much does it really matter? They're learning. People are learning new jobs all the time. Khenpo Rinpoche is really keen on this, wasn't he? He was very keen that all the nuns, they learn all the jobs so they can all rotate. So if somebody's off doing something else, then somebody else can step in their place. And that's what it means, really. You hold your position without attachment, and that's good. And it depends how you want to use self, really, because yourself, you're playing that role, and you can be very happy in that role, and you can be very happy moving into another role. But then if you start to identify with the role and think, well, I can only play this role, and after all, this is a superior role. If I have to now go and clean the lavatories, I'm obviously being demoted, and that's terrible. People will see that I'm cleaning the lavatories, and what will they think, That's attachment, isn't it? An attachment to myself and my self-image and who I think I am. But if I think, oh, it's toilets, is it? Okay, I can do toilets. If I can't, I'll ask someone, find out how to do it. And there's no attachment there, is there? It's not attachment to self. So that's my suggestion. We have an idea that heart connections relate to being in here, I think it says. However, we can have a strong heart connection with people that feel painful. So does it say in here?
No, I don't think so. I'll
Can
have
you
to
not
read
relate
it.
to
That's
being-
my best handwriting as well. Excuse me.
That can't
Okay.
be in here.
We have an idea in tune. We
Oh.
have an idea that heart connections relate to being in tune.
In tune, I beg your pardon. It's quite clear now, you tell me. However, we can have strong heart connections with people that feel painful. And is the pain that we feel when we feel disconnected an indicator of disconnection? And how can we meet that from our side? So when we say heart connections, you could say And it relates to some of the other questions here. You could say we only have one heart between us all. Right? We're all emanating from the same heart, which explains a lot. You could say we're all emanating from the same Buddha heart. So that's why we recognise each other. We're all emanating from the same place. And the nearer we get to our heart, the nearer we get to that place where we all meet. And we use that language, don't we? We all meet in our heart. I mean, it's interesting. In spite of the materialism of our age, we still say that. So we're not, we haven't lost our way entirely. But then sometimes we're in tune. And we're in tune when we're close to our own heart and somebody else is close to their heart. I mean, it's just lovely, isn't it? It's just lovely. You don't really need to say very much. Sometimes you can just feel it and relief, isn't it? Don't have to say too much. You can sense it. And everything is very uncomplicated. You can more or less, you don't need to worry too much what you're going to say, because the other person will pick up the sense of what you're saying without too much complication. And then it starts to feel very strong, actually, even though in a sense you could say not much has happened. In fact, maybe nothing's happened, but it feels really, really strong. Really strong. Often it can be through the eyes, can't it? It doesn't necessarily. I mean, I'm sure blind people have just as much sense of strong connection. And sometimes that's painful, isn't it? For two different reasons. One kind of reason is because the other person's in pain. And so when you see them in pain, or you kind of connect to their pain, you do feel the pain of that. But strangely, I often point this out, the strange thing about that pain is you don't really want to not have it. Strange, isn't it? Like if you know they're in pain and you're not in pain, at some level, so that somehow the aliveness to their pain touches something in our heart, which in a way, if we're all coming from the same heart, that's not surprising. And then that pain, strange, you can't really say it's pleasurable because it doesn't make sense. But it feels so alive and meaningful and moving. It brings tears to your eyes, and that in a very meaningful way. This is what we call compassion, isn't it? You could even cry, but you're kind of relieved that you're crying. I don't know, something like that. And then there's the other kind of pain where something's blocking. There really is something has got in between. And I think what I find really interesting is when distrust arises, or something gets in the way where someone cuts off, or you cut off. It's always an added element that's complicated it. It's always a complication. And when that complication dissolves, it's not like then you have to build up a connection. As soon as that's gone, it's very strange. You're completely in this completely different relationship. As if, yeah, you know what I mean? Sort of like the relationship can change just like that. When whatever it was, somebody, either you or they let go of something. Suddenly, there's this tremendous sense of warmth and connection, and we call it love, don't we? Yeah. Real, genuine love starts to emerge. I find that really interesting. It's like with trust and mistrust. How do you trust someone? Actually, it's more, how do you mistrust someone? We have a way of not trusting, which is introducing a doubt, something that's blocking. When you remove the block, you don't actually do anything. You're just in that space of connectedness. You don't have to build. I mean, in a way, you can say we build trust, but really, it is removing mistrust, isn't it? Removing all that hesitation and doubt and awkwardness, and then it's just easy. That's the nice thing about trust. It just makes things very powerful and easy and energized and creative. Yes. So if someone is disconnected, and I think we all have that experience, don't we? Either we have ourselves disconnected, but you can do more about that because it's you. But if the other person's disconnected, sometimes it's really hard to do anything about it. I mean, NVC can really help, non-violent communication can really help, but I don't know how many of you, are you all familiar with it? Non-violent communication? The sense of kind of recognising in yourself what your feeling is about that disconnection, and then recognising in yourself what it is that's important to you, and till you get to the point where you really can move into the other person's shoes, if you like, or mountain, and sense what it is that they're missing and wanting and what their cutting off is about, and being able to talk from that place. I really like it that there's that possibility of approaching that problem in that way, but it's it's not always so obvious, and I'm sure there are cases where the other person's determined they don't want to connect, in which case you just have to deal with your own side of it. But what you can do, even if there doesn't seem much chance of that connection, loosening up so that you can actually, that whatever's obstructing it disappearing in the immediate future, you can make pranidhanas, you can make a strong wish that it should be like that. And I often find that when somebody is disconnecting from me, there's a kind of despair on my side where I think I feel helpless and that I can't do anything. And to actually then make a very strong wish, every time, whenever we encounter each other in any situation, in all our future lifetimes, may we always have a good relationship and be able to use it to benefit many beings. It's like going against my, pulling back, feeling helpless. It's like stepping into another mandala. May we always have this good relationship in all our future lifetimes. So they think, hang on, I can do that. I don't feel it's likely to happen in the near future, but it doesn't matter what I feel, I can still make that wish, because actually, that is what I wish. I can get behind that. I really wish that, and you feel really empowered to realise that's what you can do. You can always do that. It must have been like that for those Tibetans in prison, mustn't they, when they're being tortured? Just making these pranidhanas for the people who are torturing them. Just keep making them. It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. So, that will do for now. Pipe up if you want to if you want to come back to me. Just do feel free. Okay, if patrons and practitioners awaken together, should we just work to support the Sangha? Is there any point in practice? Or would that be practice? What about heart connections with teachers who have passed away and we have never met? Are these connections real or are we making them up? Right. It's really a matter of our personal choice and inspiration, isn't it? I always think that about all the good things that one could do with one's life. So many good things we could do with our life, and somehow we choose something, don't we? Sometimes it chooses us. You know, it might be, you know, that we have a sick parent or something like that, and so it chooses us because, you know, that's what we're called to do, to look after that person. Sometimes we do have choice, and I notice people choose very differently. They follow an inspiration that's coming from themselves, which I think is wonderful, really. You feel that inspiration. Sometimes the need in the situation produces the inspiration. You know, you see a particular need. It isn't what you would have chosen if you know, but because you can feel that need for it so strongly, you choose it wholeheartedly because you can see, I could make a difference, I could do this. I think it's the same within the Sangha. You may find your life choices have put you in a certain situation and you think, I can't really do retreats, I can't really do much study, or I can't, but I could support other people who are doing it. So then this is a wonderful message, isn't it? That whatever, you know, we get enlightened together. Like I was saying with this aspiration, we can make that prayer to be enlightened together. I will always support you, and we'll all help each other in all our future lifetimes. We'll have this really strong Dharma connection. We'll work together, even after enlightenment, we'll work together to help beings together. We'll make a good team, you know. So yes, why not? You can make that your practice. I remember when, in the early days, when we first heard about this teaching of rejoicing in the good done by others, that if you rejoice in the good done by someone else, you make the same punya as they do. In fact, you could make more, because you might be genuinely rejoicing in their deeds with a purer motive than they are actually doing them. So it's a win-win situation. So this one chap who was new to Dharma, and he wasn't sure he really went along with it, and he said, but I like that, can I just practice that? And he actually was in the Dharma Centre, he was just going around watching people practicing and rejoicing in it. And it created such a great atmosphere. Yeah, it was really great. That was Jim. Do you remember Jim? Jim and Stace.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was Jim.
Yeah, that was
he made
Jim.
that his practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah. So yes, why not? And is there any point in practice? Well, that would be practice, wouldn't it? You know, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes that is a good thing to do. Like we've got Dasha in retreat at the moment. You know, and we're all rejoicing in that. And he's getting a lot of inspiration from the fact that we're inspired by what he's doing. So you can really feel the energy of that going back and forth. And maybe it's, you know, at some point, it'll be Jonathan in retreat, won't it? Well, there's no harm in an aspiration, is there? When he's done with this, with our website.
Yeah, use the website first.
So yes, there's a lot of point in so many things. You know, we've all got our part to play, and there's a big point in all of it, and it can all be turned into Dharma practice. And especially if you think in terms of mandala principle, if we're all in the same mandala, all helping each other, we're all going to get enlightened together. Wow, it's all good news, isn't it? Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So what about heart connections with teachers who have passed away? Have they passed away? What do we mean by a person? Can people really pass away? They can disappear from this world, but can they really, do they ever go anywhere, actually? Does anyone ever go anywhere? I'm talking about emptiness again. No? what are we? We're empty. We've always been empty. So empty things don't go anywhere, do they? If it's empty, how can it go anywhere? How can it be anywhere? How can it be any time? Any of us, ever? Well, it's like we somehow, you could say, well, all beings are connected all the time without any, they never are apart from each other. There never is any distance, there never is any problem. You know, this is this old-chain view, isn't it? It's all perfect. So we could all go home. it's all perfect just as it is. But since we can't quite see that, there's something we can do about it, even from our deluded point of view. So we're moving from our deluded point of view towards that awakened point of view where it never was a problem. We all were connected, and still are, and always will be. We all interpenetrate with all the Buddhas. We're really not a problem. I think none of us are a problem. Amazing. How can we convince ourselves so well that we are a problem? And we have a problem. But I get my moments of inspiration when I say things like that. And I'm back to, here we all are, trying to build a Sangha and follow a path to awakening. You have an insight, and you think, as the insight arises, it's so obvious. You can't imagine you'll ever forget it. And then you're not in it anymore. It's kind of like, and that's why we have to practice. It's very strange, isn't it? Like you can recognise there's no need to practice. That's a deep insight. And now what are you going to do? You've got to practice to realise it, to really realise it. So that becomes stable. And then you've got all these different ways of helping to make it stable. One of which is placing ourselves in a mandala that's orientated towards awakening, connected to people who are orientated towards awakening, connected to people who already have awakened, connected to their true nature, which is actually our true nature, and which is the true nature of the universe. So we can place ourselves in the right, orientate ourselves in the right way, and then try to get that glimpse again of, oh yes. It comes in and out of focus, really, isn't it? When the insight comes, it's like it coming into focus, and then you go out of focus again. Shikpo uses the language of foreground and background, which I think is very appropriate. Like the deluded view comes into the foreground, and I see you as all separate people, and then the deluded view goes into the background, and I suddenly feel very close to you all, as if we're just of one heart, one mind, and it's just simple. And then it goes out of focus again. But it doesn't go anywhere really. Nothing's really changed. And I feel that very strongly with teachers of the lineage. I just have to think to myself about, something, the lineage going back as far as, let's say, Milarepa, Marpa and Milarepa and all the Kagyus and all the Karmapas, and then the 16th Karmapa comes very strongly to mind. Of course, I have a really living connection with him. But then, and His Holiness Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche and all the lamas that are connected to them, who I've met. And you kind of feel it is one, it's all connected, it's all like one whole, you could say family, but families aren't always very good example of good relations. But in the same sense that there's a kind of inescapable connection, and that there's that power, you could say the genes of the family are coming down. It's like the genes of this spiritual family are coming down and are in us, and we have those connections. And even knowing that you meet somebody who has a strong connection with a teacher of the lineage, you feel that really is a living connection of some kind. Because actually it is, because all your connections that are very, your world is actually interfacing with that lineage connection. And that's why these things that kind of integral to one world, like a relic, for example. So they're part of the body of a teacher from the past. It could be anyone from the past, but here we're wanting to link into the mandala of awakening. Actually, that's intrinsic to that mandala. So when our mandala meets that relic, we tend to think that it's all mind and matter or self and other, but actually mind and matter. If those are actually false distinctions, when we actually meet, when our world, if you like, mind, body, includes within itself that relic which is their mind and body, world, we've made a connection, a strong connection. So then if we then acknowledge that and make offerings and empower it, it becomes like a channel, if you like, a way that we can really link to the power of their adhisthana. So you could say, well, isn't it all-pervading anyway? Yes, you could say that, it's all-pervading anyway. So if you can link into it that way, good. Yeah?
Lama, is that the same basically as feeling a connection with perhaps a teacher who you've never physically met, who's no longer physically in this world, but you read their books and feel a connection?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it must be, mustn't it? Because their words have created that book, really, haven't they? And so you are, Richie, you have a direct connection with their words. Often people have dreams of lamas. Maybe, maybe they've read a book of theirs or seen their picture, or maybe not. So you sort of feel those connections are alive in this world, and if you've had a connection in the past, it does actually manifest again in this life, which is very reassuring, isn't it?
Those teachers that you might have had instructions from when you were just coming into Buddhism, but then you gravitate to another lineage, but there's still that feeling that was your first.
Of course.
But that's not strictly your lineage anymore. But there still feels that.
That's right. This is like Ashvajit, isn't it?
Right.
He met Ashvajit. Shariputra meets Ashvajit. He never forgets that this was his way into the Dharma.
Mm.
That was the connection, and therefore he's going to always honour that, because whenever he meets that connection with that person, he will also meet his connection with the Buddha. So this is what you call an auspicious connection, and to really honour those connections. And this is something I discuss in my book a bit, this my teacher, my lineage kind of attitude that I think it happens because of the way our language works. Just because you're mainly following a particular lineage and you're making, you're taking guidance from teachings from a certain lineage and you're following the practices of a certain lineage, it doesn't mean you're rejecting anybody else's. It's just a practical decision, isn't it? That you can't do everything at once. If you're going to do something properly, you've got to decide how you're going to do it. And so you've decided you're going to go this way, and you do that properly, and you arrive at the heart. And if you'd stayed on this one, and this was properly, if you'd followed it through, you'd have arrived at the same heart. But if you tried to sort of practice here and practice there at the same time, you would have stayed here.
Yes.
So it's just a practical choice. You don't need to think they're not. You can carry on saying, this is my. Yes, that I did my first teacher was a Sakya, or my first teacher was a Gelugpa, and say it with great pride and delight, you know, that I have that connection. Isn't that wonderful? Not, well, I did, but, you know, I picked over to somewhere else in a sort of guilty way. And I think it's really important that you really do that in a way that honours those connections. So, you know, even if, I talk about this to some extent in my book, about how you've been following one teacher and then somehow various things happen and then you find you actually want to follow some other teacher for whatever reason. Actually, that's not a bad thing, and especially if you can then go to that teacher and explain them to them. This is what's happened and this is what I'm doing, and I'm really grateful for the teaching you gave me. You may want their blessing, would you give me blessing for that? Or you may not, you know, or you may think, you may be perfectly aware that they're not happy. Nonetheless, you know, you can apologise and say, you know, I'm really sorry, I don't want to let you down, but this is what's happened. And make it as good as you can, you know, and honour it. I think that's important.
You were saying something about relics and the Adhisthana, and you said you could say that the Adhisthana is everywhere, and then I didn't.
Yeah, you could say that. So what I was saying is, yeah, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. It is.
And then I didn't hear the last bit when you said so the relic.
I think it's again something to do with inspiration, isn't it? So if you really felt that that presence all the time, really clearly, and you were in that presence all the time, the relic wouldn't mean so much to you as somebody who was struggling a bit, but they found whenever they got in contact with the relic and they worshipped the relic, that really brought that alive for them. And there's a good reason for that. So, you know, go with that inspiration. So, you know, the chances are, I think, because we don't really believe in things like relics, you know, culturally, and some people do, but it's a tendency that way. We think, oh, well, it's easier to relate to the Dharmakaya, or pervading aspect. But sometimes that is just a little bit of a cop-out, that it's just our way of not really understanding what those connections mean. And it's just easier for us to think in a more abstract way because of the way we're educated. It's quite important to bear that in mind, that maybe later on I'll get more sense of what's important about a relic. And I can do both, you know, recognise or, you know, making offerings to a relic is actually meaningful, even though at the same time it's true that, you know, the Buddha's all-pervading and my Buddha nature is all-pervading and the whole universe is actually emanating from the same source, so there isn't any separation anyway. When you really and truly realise that, all sorts of things are going to be possible. But in the meantime, yeah, different things can be helpful. It's interesting, isn't it? So, a teacher who's passed away or you've never met. I've got teachers I've never met that I'm quite devoted to. Yeah. Like I've seen a photo of Minling Tristan, Chandra Rinpoche's father. And I feel a very strong connection with him. And when she met me, she seemed to feel a very strong connection with me. But I never actually did meet him. I never actually made the effort to go and see him. So I feel it's very real. And I make aspiration for this. That, you know, we meet again, we meet in the future again and again, and, you know, whenever's possible. So yeah, think of it as real and make aspirations. And if you have got that strong feeling, it's a sign that you've got some kind of connection. So feel pleased about that. So I would say these connections are very real. And yeah, well, making things up is what we do, isn't it? We're making things up all the time, so We want to go with the real connections. And some of the real connections, they're so real that even if we don't make them up, they're still there. And some, we'd like them to be there, so we make them up. And by doing that enough, we actually make them. You see what I mean? If everyone's been my mother, I have the same intimate connection with everyone. So what is a hierarchy of heart connections? And interesting here, hierarchy means rejection. So again, this word hierarchy is a problem, isn't it? It suggests rejection, judgment, something bad. So maybe we have to work on finding another word. Because I just think of hierarchy as just a practical thing. But obviously for other people they're hearing something else. But I think the question still stands in the sense that we do have the same connection with everybody in a way. We've all been, there's no limit to how often we've appeared and made connections with each other. So yeah, we've all been each other's mothers. We've also been each other's worst enemies. We've all done terrible things to each other. We don't remember any of it, do we? Just as well. So then how come we talk about some connections as closer than others? I think in a practical sense, obviously if we're in this world at this time, we have a very special connection with those, family, mother and father and all those who hold the same sort of genes, if you like. They're kind of like a very strong connection. And then upbringing, strong connection with those people who brought us up, who took care of us, strong connection with people that we've shared very strong experience with, people we've worked with and so on. So we've developed in this lifetime, well, we say we've developed, but actually it's happened to us, hasn't it? These connections have happened to us in this life, and they're there. And I was saying the other day that if it's your family, dependent on you, to ignore them and think, well, somebody the other side of the world who's suffering more is, I'm going to help them instead. Doesn't quite work, does it? There's always going to be far, far more people that you need your help than you can possibly help. And yet these people that are very close to you in the mandala, or your home, family, town, whatever, the closer they are to you, the more, in a sense, the more you can help them. You're closer to them, there's a real living relationship with them. To not help them has a tremendous impact on them. Like if a mother doesn't help their child, it's quite a terrible thing for the child, isn't it? Whereas there's nobody else who could be to that child who you could be if you're the mother of the child. The same with all your other relationships. So that's what I mean by a hierarchy of connections. Yes, in principle, we have the same connection with everybody, but actually, as we are appearing in this world, this mandala of our life now, there are those that we are more responsible for than others. And it's really important to honour that. Really important to honour that. I think I really didn't think about that too much when I was young. Quite interesting, my parents, they weren't happy about my going off to India and living with Tibetans and that kind of stuff. And yet the Tibetans would always say to me, "Oh, it's so wonderful that you, so young, from so far away, have come here to practice Dharma. Your parents must be so happy. They must be so pleased." Little do they know. they couldn't imagine their children, they would be so pleased if that's what their children are doing. And it's kind of strange. I don't know what choices I would have made if I think as I think now, then, but that's just, yeah. Interesting though, isn't it? And how much can you actually help the people that are close to you? I mean, how much could I actually have helped them anyway, really? I don't know. I mean, it wasn't gross. I mean, it wasn't like they were left uncared for or something like that, really. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can care too much for other people's, feelings because actually it's not going to help them really. And Dharma is going to help them in the end. So I think the Tibetans were right, really, that I was benefiting them, even though they didn't think so. I still make those aspirations that whatever I've done with my life will benefit them in all future lives. So no, I don't think of hierarchy means rejection. I don't know if I need to say that again. Tsongkhapa advised we die alone to avoid attachment to life or attachment to near ones, probably. How do we distinguish heart connections from self-serving attachment? It's important to do that, but quite often you find the people you're most attached to are the people you have the strongest heart connection with, So you're going to really have to deal with that. That it would be worse to neglect the connection than to be attached. Because actually the attachment's mainly going to hurt you, isn't it? I always think of that with children, as children grow up. And it must be impossible to know how much is attachment and how much is just your natural connection to them. And then it's time for them to leave and go their own way. Then you'd be able to see, whether you've got it right. Because if you can let them go and you can be happy for them going, even though it hurts because of the attachment, it's actually, you think, yeah, no, I was mainly doing it for them. It wasn't mainly for me. Yeah. But I think that's with all our relationships. You can see there are moments when with a sense of relief, you realise it was real love. It wasn't just attachment. Whereas attachment is when you can't let the other person go. You can't. You're just kind of... It's an interesting... I think it's quite subtle and quite interesting and important to recognise that attachment, and gross attachment, it's easy to detect, but subtle attachment, maybe it's not so bad. In the sutra, there's a sutra, what's it called? Definitive Vinaya, where Upali, who's a great expert on discipline, is saying, sometimes the Buddha teaches that attachment is good. Being attached to beings is good. He doesn't always teach about, suffering and impermanence and illusoriness. Sometimes he talks about attachment being good. And for a Mahayana practitioner, it's better to be too attached than too detached. So you can err in the direction. What does it say? The fault of hatred is very great, but easily removed. And that, isn't it? And then the fault of attachment is great and difficult to remove. And the fault of... I think that's right. And then the fault of the third one, moha, the confusion, is the most difficult and the most difficult to remove, isn't it? So it was interesting, the hatred is actually relatively easy to remove. And maybe the attachment is difficult to remove, and the most difficult of all is the confusion. I think that's right. Pick it up. It's interesting, isn't it? for a Mahayana practitioner, to err slightly in the direction of attachment to people, and it's that's just how it is. It's very difficult, isn't it, to disentangle those. Is a bad or negative connection still a strong heart connection? Sometimes they can be very strong connection, can't they? You know, if someone's done something to you awful, or you've done something awful to someone, it's really hard to forget that person, isn't it? You know, you're really hooked. Yeah, you're really bound together by what happened. So you can rejoice in that. Think, well, this is a good connection. And again, you can make these pranidhanas. You think, because we have such a strong connection, and I'm using it to make this very strong pranidhana, made something totally positive come out of this. Yeah, and then who knows, maybe some of our best friends were like that in past lives, you know, that we're now such good, strong friends because we made these pranidhanas in the past, because we weren't. Is a bad or negative connection still a strong connection? Yeah. Is it about engagement? What is happening when you don't feel either a good or a bad connection? And our heart connection's two-way. Is it about engagement? I think we're talking now about our sense of a connection being a strong connection, isn't it? So if we're strongly engaged with a person, then that person becomes very important in our mandala, don't they? And then you're bound to have a strong connection with them because you're very much engaged with them because of... And then...
It's not quite, this is my question. It's coming from the sense that a bad connections, because it's something happening, is always better than feeling nothing for somebody.
It's true, yeah.
Whether that's right or that's the right intuition or not.
Um,
And how you deal with that, because there's some people who just don't feel any sense.
That's right, that's right. I don't know, because I think we feel somewhat like that about most people, don't we? Like if you're driving along the road, you know, all these people are passing you, you just don't feel connected with them at all, do you? And that's the majority of people, whereas the people sitting with you in the car, that's very strong, isn't it?
Not always, there's some people who just can't get any kind of grip on it or can't.
Yeah, so that's the next bit of it, isn't it?
Not closely bound up with it.
Yeah. So what's happening when you don't feel that? Yeah. What is it? Something's getting in the way, isn't it? And then sometimes it's like that, and then something happens. You know, it's like something we were talking about that, wasn't it? Something happens, and your lives suddenly get very tightly bound together. Like Caroline was talking about her next door neighbour who fell down and banged her head. And until then, there hadn't been much connection. And now, you know, since that time, it's come alive, it's come awake. So I suppose that's what you're asking, really, isn't it? I don't think you know, you don't need to feel a special feeling of connection for there to be a connection. I mean, it's just there. Sometimes you really feel it, and then that's good, you can work with it. And sometimes you don't feel it, and then something happens, and then you do feel it, and then you can work with it. Yeah. So I think you can think it's always there. Sometimes you just don't feel it. And then sometimes it would be overwhelming if you did, wouldn't it? I mean, because of how we see things, how we see the world, we're easily overwhelmed. And too many relationships, and it all gets too much quite quickly, actually, isn't it? You can't have the same intensity of relationship with too many people. So, again, I think you have to follow your own inspiration with that.
Following on from that discussion, what would it feel like to be a Bodhisattva and to feel all that?
I know.
All those people, wouldn't that be
That's when you really have to have realised emptiness. You know, if you'd really realised emptiness, you'd realise it was like that. And actually, just spontaneously, actually, without having to do anything, you could actually honour all those connections, and benefit others. Just because we haven't realised emptiness, we think we're a little me that can be overwhelmed. Yeah, that's it really. I think so.
It's that easy.
Ultimately, it's simple, but to get that simple is a long journey. Strange, isn't it? Why should it be such a strong, long journey to become that simple? But it's kind of inspiring at the same time, isn't it? To think. I think it helps to realise actually that's the journey, to move from being complicated to simple. And that's what enlightened beings are. They're not so clever that they can actually do all these things that we can't do. It's that they're simple and they're allowing their Buddha nature to do what our Buddha nature would do if we weren't so complicated. Sounds right, doesn't it? Sounds right, doesn't it? Sounds right to me. Heart connections two-way, yes, definitely. I think they're two-way with every single being that ever is, was, or will be. So how does that happen? I think this is where interpenetration, again it's emptiness, but it's interpenetration. We're all completely interpenetrating each other. So we're all completely limitless, vast, integral to totality, and yet we can sit and talk to each other. Isn't that great? I love the Mahayana Sutras where the Buddhas talk to each other. Each Buddha is so incredible, you think, you couldn't have another one. And actually they're all totally incredible and they all talk to each other. And I love it what they say to each other when they visit each other from the other side of the universe. They sort of say to each other, how are you? How are you feeling? Are your students giving you trouble? Fantastic, isn't it? When you read the Mahayana Sutras, you think, these have to be an exaggeration. And then after some time you start to realise, no, they're not an exaggeration. They're making it so it's comprehensible, so they've damped it down to a level where we can almost feel we understand it. It's actually even more amazing. But yeah, when you encounter a person, this is where we were talking last year, I think, about self and other, weren't we? When you encounter another person as other, they're not separate, but there's this interface between their mandala and your mandala. And that's happening with all beings all the time, between all of us, but some things are now in the foreground and some things are in the background. So at the moment, our mandalas, everything that you are, all your past lives, all your home life, all your associates, all your friends, everything, all the mandalas associated with each one of you, in a sense, are right here in this room. But we're just seeing the foreground, aren't we? We're just seeing, our little bodies, little cardboard cut-out figures sitting around on chairs. But that's just such a tiny part of what we actually, each of us is. It's amazing, isn't it? But that's the foreground, and the background is amazing. But none of it's anywhere. And that's why it's so important to realise emptiness. None of it's anywhere. It's wonderful, really, isn't it? I'll try not to keep chattering on. What is the nature of a heart connection after one has died? It's the same. Yeah, and it is real, yes. And it is continuing. Continuing in the sense that it isn't in time. But then you could manifest in another, and that something else could come in the foreground, and that connection with that person could manifest in the foreground again. And it would actually meet up with the whole mandala of connections that we've had before. And they could be like really, really on the surface and in the foreground, and they might be very close in with your close mandala, and you would actually feel that very strongly. And sometimes, I'm just thinking of the example they always give. I think it's in the Pali Canon, but I know Kala Rinpoche always used to quote it. What was it? Somebody, was it Shaiputra, or somebody laughed when they saw a woman with a baby eating a fish. Does it ring a bell?
Yeah.
The Buddha saw somebody and he laughed. And then he said, "Why do you laugh?" And he said, "Because the baby was that woman's worst enemy, the fish was her father, and whatever. So that all the relationships had turned around, and she now was disregarding the fish, totally loved the baby.
And the dog was her best friend.
And the dog was and so all the relationships had changed, but actually the connections were the same connections as before, but something completely different was appearing in the foreground. And the way that she was relating to it, she didn't recognise those connections. So I think that's actually quite a helpful illustration of the principle, isn't it? So who knows who we might have been to each other last time? Amazing. Yeah. What is the nature of a heart connection after suicide? Yes, is it real? Is it continuing? And what is, because when you say continuing, you couldn't really say that the fish, sort of your father, somehow had been your father. But what's the connection between your father now and the fish? How did that happen? And is that a continuity? Or is it actually something else? Is it a kind of jumping from one mandala into another? So your father dissolved into the clear light, re-emerged as a fish. Is that a continuity? Because your father didn't actually go anywhere. None of us went anywhere. So if you're calling that a continuity, yes. But continuity sort of implies time, doesn't it? And then you've got a problem, because how could your father's consciousness get into a fish?
It's a kind of simple question that arising from after somebody's died.
Yeah.
Have the sense that connection is still alive.
You do.
But to what extent is that real? Or is that, because some of it could just be wishful thinking or imagination?
I think it doesn't do any harm to believe the heart connection is real and really relate to that as real. I think where it can move into fantasy is when you do start imagining things and you start to relate to that in too grasping a way, because I think you might harm somebody that way, by what they tell you to do if you are contacting someone who's died is to tell them they've died and to go, to move on, so that you don't hold them back by saying, carrying on this, holding on to them. So from the Buddhist point of view, it wouldn't be good to kind of spend lots of time with mediums and trying to talk to them and that kind of thing. Better to encourage them to go and connect them to the Dharma and, send them on the way. So, but it's good to think that they're there and you can talk to them. So please talk to me when I've died. Tell me I'm dead. Do some prayers for me. Do your practice very nicely and dedicate it for me. And help me on my way. What's the point of students if they don't do that for you? What is there to connect with? I think that's really important, that question. What is there to connect with? It's really, the question is, what's a person, isn't it? What is a person? And it's really interesting because sometimes people think the Buddha said there's no self, there's no person. He never did. He didn't say there was no self, and he never said there's no person. What he was saying is what is impermanent and changing and unreal is not what you are. So what are you? And it comes back to, straight to, well, we are the Buddha nature, we're manifestations of the Buddha nature. And that means that we're all interpenetrating emptiness. We're amazing. So somebody who's died, you can tell them that. Yeah, pray to the Buddha because you're actually inseparable from the Buddha, and if you turn your mind to the Buddha, you're with the Buddha and the Buddha can help you. Why not? So yeah. Their Buddha nature, if you want to know what can they connect, what are we connecting with, we're connecting with their Buddha nature. And that's what we intuit in our heart, isn't it? We can feel that heart connection is still there. And I've probably told you this story before, but I found it very moving when a woman I didn't know at all rang me up once and was crying and said, my husband has disappeared. And for me, that would be just the most worst thing, somebody disappearing, because, you just... And she was desperate, and then it just came to me, thank goodness, something came to me, and I said, but he's still in your heart. And I could feel immediately she could pull herself together. It was quite interesting, without a moment's hesitation. You could feel the sense of relief. That's true, that's true, that's true. Which is, I found that really quite moving. Quite moving. I mean, if she'd said, what the hell do you mean? What are you talking about? I mean, I couldn't have said anything more, could I? She didn't. So I think that's my time up. So I've still got some more for tomorrow. And thank you very much. I found those questions very stimulating and helpful. It also helps me to see whether the way I'm using language is helpful or not. Like if I get this conversation where you're coming back to me, I can see what's happening. And obviously something around hierarchy isn't quite working. I'll carry on thinking about that. So, we dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Chanchu Sani Rinpoche Majepanam Jejuji Jebanyambam Evalam Gane Gandhi Gavashu Chanchu Sani Rinpoche Majepanam Jejuji Jebanyambam Evalam Gane Gandhi Gavashu Chanchu Sani Rinpoche Majepanam Jejuji Jebanyambam Evalam Gane Gandhi Gavashu. So we've been doing these hand dancing because when we were in Tech Chok Ling this year there was this very nice Hawaiian lady who trained in Nepali classical dance, and she was putting some of our Rinpoche's songs into to dance, and she did these are gestures for the long life of Khenpo Rinpoche, so that's what it's all about. You shine with the radiance of intelligence, skillful play. You are directions the melodious sound of your song reverberates. You sing the songs of the deep meaning of the view and meditation. Genuine spiritual friend, may your feet continue their playful dance. We beg you to always remain. Certain yearns and shingy and shin. Certain down so madre so sonam. Tagom samo guyan children. Shenyen dam pa shape